Hey there, night owls and fellow lovers of history. Welcome back to Insomnia History, the place where we share quiet, strange, and sometimes haunting stories to help you relax and drift off into the night. Tonight, we're taking a journey through one of humanity's deepest obsessions, the quest for immortality. From ancient empires to alchemists and emperors, people throughout history have tried everything to live forever, often in ways that seem almost unbelievable today. So, settle in, get cozy, and let the stories carry you off to sleep. If you enjoy these calm and curious journeys through the mysteries of the past, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your favorite part, and share it with others who might enjoy a little history before bed. Let's keep growing this community of curious minds, one peaceful story at a time. Have you ever been so tired that you fought to keep your eyes open, struggling against the inevitable pull of sleep? Imagine doing that not just for a night, but as a deliberate lifelong practice. In the cradle of civilization, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the ancient Mesopotamians developed a bizarre belief about immortality that would sound utterly alien to modern ears. They believed that sleep was a form of temporary death, a nightly rehearsal for the permanent slumber that awaits us all. Long before the pyramids reached toward the Egyptian sky, the people of Mesopotamia grappled with the mystery of mortality. Their civilization, spanning from roughly 4,500 BCE to 539 BCE, gave us writing, mathematics, astronomy, and complex urban societies. Yet, despite these remarkable achievements, they shared the same fundamental fear that haunts every human culture: the inevitability of death. The Mesopotamian worldview was deeply influenced by their environment. Living in the unpredictable floodplains between two mighty rivers, they experienced both catastrophic floods and life-giving irrigation. This duality shaped their understanding of existence as a precarious balance between order and chaos, life and death. Their cosmology positioned humans as servants to capricious gods, created from clay to perform tasks the divine beings found tedious. Within this framework, sleep occupied a troubling position. The Mesopotamians observed the similarities between sleep and death. The closed eyes, the stillness of the body, the seeming departure of consciousness. In their theological understanding, sleep represented a dangerous state where the soul temporarily departed the body to wander in the realm of dreams, perilously close to the land of the dead. This concept appears in numerous Mesopotamian texts. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, perhaps humanity's oldest written story, the eponymous hero is described as being like a man lying in a dream. When his beloved friend Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh laments, "Sleep has now seized you. You have grown dark and cannot hear me." The parallel between sleep and death is unmistakable, a literary reflection of deeply held cultural beliefs. The Mesopotamian underworld, known as Kur or Irkala, was imagined as a dark, dusty place where souls consumed clay and dust, trapped in eternal boredom. Given this bleak afterlife, it's unsurprising that Mesopotamians sought ways to postpone their journey there. If sleep was a rehearsal for death, then avoiding sleep might be a path to immortality. Some Mesopotamian priests and mystics developed elaborate rituals designed to ward off sleep. These weren't merely academic exercises, but desperate attempts to cheat death itself. Cuneiform tablets from Nineveh and Babylon describe special incantations to be recited when one felt drowsiness approaching. These spells invoked protective deities like Shamash, god of the sun, to banish the demons of slumber that threatened to drag one into the realm of death. Archaeological evidence suggests some practitioners used a combination of stimulant herbs and painful physical practices to remain awake. Certain religious devotees would wear garments lined with thorns or small stones, ensuring that any lapse into sleep would bring immediate, awakening pain. Others employed servants whose sole duty was to prevent their master from falling asleep, using everything from loud noises to physical prodding. The wealthy and powerful sometimes constructed special chambers, designed to make sleep difficult. These rooms featured uncomfortably angled floors, harsh lighting from oil lamps positioned to shine directly on the face, and in some cases, mechanisms that would create sudden sounds at irregular intervals. The psychological toll of such sleep deprivation must have been enormous, yet the fear of death proved an even more powerful motivator. Mesopotamian medical texts describe concoctions made from local plants with stimulant properties. Modern analysis suggests these likely included ephedra-like substances that could temporarily ward off fatigue. Other preparations contained various mineral compounds, some potentially toxic, mixed with honey or beer to make them palatable. These ancient energy drinks would have provided temporary alertness at the cost of increasing physical stress. Religious practitioners sometimes engaged in marathon ritual sessions that could last for days. During these ceremonies, priests would chant, dance, and perform elaborate rites dedicated to deities associated with vitality and wakefulness. Participants believed these rituals strengthened their connection to life-giving forces, potentially extending their years or even conferring immortality. The cultural emphasis on wakefulness extended beyond individual practices. In some Mesopotamian cities, communal festivals of wakefulness occurred during celestial events like eclipses or the appearance of comets, which were interpreted as moments when the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead grew thin. During these festivals, entire communities would remain awake together, lighting bonfires and engaging in continuous activity to affirm their collective vitality. Royal chronicles suggest that certain kings became particularly obsessed with avoiding sleep. The Assyrian ruler Ashurbanipal, known for creating one of the ancient world's greatest libraries, reportedly experimented with various methods to reduce his need for sleep. Court physicians created special diets and treatments intended to keep him alert and active. His royal inscriptions boast of his vigilance, describing him as the king whose eyes are always open, watching over his people. Of course, these attempts at avoiding sleep were ultimately doomed to failure. The human body cannot indefinitely withstand sleep deprivation. Modern science has demonstrated that prolonged wakefulness leads to hallucinations, cognitive impairment, immune system breakdown, and eventually death. Far from achieving immortality, those who push themselves to remain awake likely shortened their lives considerably. The tragic irony is that these sleep-deprived individuals probably experienced many of the symptoms they most feared. Severe sleep deprivation produces visual and auditory hallucinations that ancient people would have interpreted as encounters with spirits or demons. The confusion and memory problems associated with lack of sleep might have seemed like the soul beginning to disconnect from the body. In pursuing immortality, they likely created experiences that reinforced their fears of death. Some Mesopotamian texts acknowledge this paradox. A fragmentary poem from the late Babylonian period laments, "The man who chases away sleep chases away life itself. His eyes see what is not there. His mind wanders where it should not go." This suggests that at least some ancient thinkers recognized the futility and danger of excessive sleep avoidance. Not all Mesopotamians pursued such extreme measures. For most ordinary citizens, practical approaches to longevity involved more reasonable practices: proper diet, cleanliness, moderation in alcohol consumption, and prayers to protective deities. The extreme sleep avoidance techniques were typically reserved for religious specialists or the very wealthy who could afford to dedicate their lives to such pursuits. The Mesopotamian concept of sleep as temporary death finds parallels in other ancient cultures. Greek mythology personified sleep, hypnos, and death, thanatos, as twin brothers, suggesting a similar conceptual connection. However, the Mesopotamian approach of actively fighting sleep as a path to immortality appears to be unique in its systematic development and religious significance. The Epic of Gilgamesh provides perhaps the most poignant commentary on these efforts. After the death of his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh embarks on a quest for immortality. He eventually meets Utnapishtim, the only human granted eternal life by the gods. To test Gilgamesh's worthiness for immortality, Utnapishtim challenges him to stay awake for 7 days and nights. Despite his determination, Gilgamesh falls asleep almost immediately. This failure symbolizes the fundamental truth that mortality is the inescapable human condition. Utnapishtim tells the sleeping Gilgamesh, "Look at him who wanted to be immortal. Sleep has blown over him like a fog." When Gilgamesh awakens and realizes he has failed, Utnapishtim points out the bread that has been baked each day while the hero slept, now in various stages of decay. It serves as a powerful visual metaphor for the passage of time and the inevitability of deterioration that comes with it. This famous literary episode suggests that Mesopotamian culture had already recognized the futility of fighting sleep as a path to immortality by the time the epic reached its standard form around 1800 BCE. Yet, archaeological evidence indicates that sleep avoidance practices continued in some religious contexts for centuries afterward, demonstrating how deeply rooted this belief was. The architectural layouts of certain temples included special chambers for priests engaged in extended wakefulness rituals. These rooms typically featured water channels that would create constant sound, bright lighting arrangements, and sometimes stone seating designed to be uncomfortable enough to prevent accidental sleeping. The considerable resources devoted to these spaces suggest institutional support for sleep avoidance practices well into the later periods of Mesopotamian civilization. For modern audiences, the Mesopotamian approach to immortality might seem bizarre or even comical, yet their fundamental concern remains deeply relevant. The desire to transcend our mortal limitations, to somehow cheat death of its certainty, continues to drive human innovation and spiritual seeking. From ancient sleep-fighting rituals to modern cryonics and digital consciousness research, the quest remains essentially the same. The Mesopotamian belief in sleep as temporary death also reflects a profound insight about consciousness. Sleep does represent a daily interruption of our continuous sense of self, a mysterious state where we lose control and awareness. In wrestling with the meaning of sleep, these ancient people were grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness that still challenge philosophers and neuroscientists today. Despite their technological limitations, the Mesopotamians developed a sophisticated theological framework for understanding sleep, death, and the possibility of eternal life. Their approach to immortality through sleep avoidance represents one of humanity's earliest systematic attempts to overcome biological limitations through religious practice. While their methods proved ineffective, the ambition behind them speaks to the timeless human desire to transcend mortality. As the Mesopotamian civilization eventually gave way to conquering empires, their sleep avoidance techniques largely disappeared from practice. However, their influence continued in more subtle ways. The association between vigilance and virtue, between wakefulness and spiritual power, echoed through many later religious traditions. When medieval Christian monks practiced night vigils, or when Buddhist meditation techniques emphasized aware wakefulness, they drew on spiritual principles not entirely unlike those of their Mesopotamian predecessors. The story of Mesopotamian sleep avoidance serves as a powerful reminder of both human ingenuity and human limitations. In their desperate fight against drowsiness, these ancient people demonstrated remarkable determination and creativity. Yet, their ultimate failure highlights the unchangeable biological realities that define our existence. No amount of ritual or willpower can fundamentally alter the human need for sleep. Perhaps the most valuable lesson from this ancient quest for immortality is not about its failure, but about what it reveals about the human condition. Our awareness of our own mortality has always been both a burden and a catalyst for meaning-making. The Mesopotamians' fight against sleep represents one of humanity's earliest documented struggles against the limitations of our existence, a struggle that continues in new forms today. As the Mesopotamian obsession with wakefulness faded into history, another ancient civilization was developing its own elaborate approach to the challenge of mortality. Along the fertile banks of the Nile River, the Egyptian civilization rose to prominence with a cultural fixation on the afterlife that surpassed perhaps any other society in history. Yet, despite their famous preparation for the world beyond, many Egyptians weren't content merely to ensure a pleasant afterlife. They wanted to delay that journey indefinitely. The Egyptian approach to immortality took a markedly different form than that of Mesopotamia. Rather than fighting natural processes like sleep, the Egyptians turned to the natural world itself for solutions. They believed the secret to eternal life might be found in special combinations of plants, animals, and minerals. Divine formulas that could transform the mortal body into an undying vessel. This belief wasn't merely a fringe practice or superstition. It was supported by the highest levels of Egyptian society and integrated into their sophisticated medical and religious systems. The Egyptian understanding of health centered on the concept of balance. Disease represented disruption to the natural order, while wellness reflected harmony with cosmic forces. Following this logic, death itself could be viewed as the ultimate imbalance, one that, theoretically, the right combination of ingredients might correct. The pharaohs, as living gods on earth, were particularly invested in extending their earthly reigns. Royal records from multiple dynasties describe court physicians specially assigned to prepare life-extending elixirs for the king. These specialists occupied prestigious positions, often serving as both medical practitioners and priests of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess associated with both healing and destruction. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the most important medical documents from ancient Egypt dating to around 1550 BCE, contains numerous formulations intended to rejuvenate the body and turn back the years. These recipes reveal the Egyptian approach to longevity as a sophisticated blend of observable medicinal effects, symbolic correspondences, and religious invocations. One famous concoction, mentioned in several medical papyri, combined the blood of black snakes with honey, ground lotus petals, and the crushed shells of rare red sea mollusks. This mixture was to be consumed at specific phases of the moon while reciting prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic. The inclusion of snake blood is particularly significant, as snakes were powerful symbols of renewal due to their ability to shed their skin and emerge seemingly reborn. The Egyptians believed certain animals possessed inherent qualities that could be transferred through consumption. The heart of a lion might impart courage and strength. The eyes of a falcon could improve vision and perception. Most relevant to immortality were creatures that seemed to defy the normal rules of life and death. The scarab beetle, emerging from seemingly lifeless dung, became a central symbol of rebirth. Preparations containing crushed scarabs were common in potions intended to prolong life. Perhaps most dangerous among the ingredients in Egyptian immortality potions was gold. Unlike many ancient peoples who valued gold primarily for its beauty and rarity, the Egyptians attributed profound spiritual properties to this metal. Gold was considered the flesh of the gods, particularly Ra, the sun deity. It was thought to be incorruptible, never tarnishing or decaying, qualities humans desperately wished to acquire for themselves. Court physicians developed methods for rendering gold consumable, typically by grinding it to a fine powder and mixing it with honey or wine. Sometimes gold would be heated repeatedly and quenched in various liquids believed to capture its divine essence. Modern analysis of preserved Egyptian medicines has indeed confirmed the presence of gold particles in some formulations, confirming these historical accounts. The tragic irony, of course, is that ingesting gold provided no life-extending benefits. While minute amounts might pass through the body harmlessly, regular consumption could lead to metal poisoning. Some Egyptologists speculate that certain pharaohs may have inadvertently shortened their lives through regular consumption of these gold-laden elixirs, though proving such theories remains challenging given the limitations of testing mummified remains. Gold wasn't the only potentially toxic ingredient in these immortality potions. The Egyptians incorporated numerous minerals into their medicinal preparations, including malachite, galena, and various copper compounds. Many of these substances could cause serious health problems when ingested regularly, creating a cruel paradox where the very potions intended to extend life might hasten death. Plant ingredients formed another crucial component of Egyptian immortality elixirs. The ancient Egyptian pharmacopoeia was remarkably extensive, utilizing hundreds of plant species, both native to the Nile Valley and imported from distant lands. The blue lotus, with its mind-altering properties, featured prominently in formulations intended to connect the consumer with divine energies. Other common botanical ingredients included frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and various bitter herbs that we now know contain compounds with genuine medicinal properties. For the most precious formulations, ingredients might be sourced from extraordinarily distant locations. Egyptian trade networks extended into sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and possibly as far as India. Expeditions were sometimes mounted specifically to obtain rare materials for royal elixirs. The famous temple reliefs at Deir el-Bahari depict Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to the land of Punt, which returned with exotic plants and resins that likely found their way into royal medicinal preparations. The preparation of these potions was surrounded by elaborate ritual. Certain ingredients needed to be harvested at specific times: dawn for solar-associated plants, night for those linked to lunar energies. The direction of stirring, the material of the preparation vessels, and the words spoken during mixing were all considered crucial to the efficacy of the final product. Even the practitioner's state of ritual purity could determine whether a potion would grant extended life or prove ineffective. One particularly interesting class of Egyptian immortality elixirs was known as S-Ankh, or breath of life potions. These formulations, mentioned in texts from the New Kingdom period, circa 1550-1070 BCE, were believed to revitalize the breath, which Egyptians considered the most essential aspect of life force. These preparations often contained aromatic resins and oils that would release strong vapors when heated. The practitioner would inhale these vapors while reciting specific incantations, believing this combination would infuse the body with renewed vitality. Despite the sophisticated nature of Egyptian medicine, which included successful surgical techniques and effective treatments for various ailments, their immortality potions remained firmly in the realm of wishful thinking. No Egyptian, regardless of wealth or status, escaped death's eventual claim. The elaborate mummification practices for which Egypt is famous stand as testament to their ultimate acceptance of mortality, even as they continued searching for ways to delay it. For the ordinary Egyptian, access to such elaborate potions remained limited. while the elite pursued immortality through exotic ingredients and complex formulations. Common people relied on simpler approaches, prayers to long-lived deities like Thoth and Pa, basic herbal remedies believed to promote health, and adherence to moral codes thought to please the gods and potentially extend one's years. The social stratification of Egyptian immortality pursuits reveals much about their society. The pharaoh's longevity was considered a matter of national importance, not merely personal concern. When a king commissioned increasingly exotic and expensive life-extending potions, he was fulfilling his cosmic role as mediator between the human and divine realms. Court physicians who failed to keep their royal patients healthy might face severe consequences, creating intense pressure to develop ever more elaborate formulations. Historical records suggest that certain pharaohs became particularly obsessed with immortality potions. Ramesses II, who ruled for an impressive 66 years, was documented as consuming daily elixirs prepared by his personal physicians. His unusually long reign might have reinforced belief in the efficacy of these preparations, though modern analysis suggests his longevity was more likely due to fortunate genetics than magical potions. Perhaps the most poignant example comes from the late period of ancient Egyptian history. As their civilization faced increasing external threats and internal decline, the desperation for life-extending remedies appears to have intensified. The Ptolemaic rulers, though ethnically Greek, embraced and expanded upon traditional Egyptian approaches to longevity. Cleopatra's Essent, the last active ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt, was said to have written her own treatise on immortality preparations. Though this text has been lost to history, archaeological evidence provides fascinating glimpses into this pharmacological quest for eternal life. Residue analysis from preserved pottery vessels has identified traces of compounds consistent with documented immortality formulations. In some elite tombs, small containers of what appear to be medicinal preparations were included among grave goods, perhaps intended to continue their life-extending function in the afterlife. The cultural significance of these potions extended beyond their literal consumption. The very act of pursuing immortality through elaborate preparations reinforced the Egyptian worldview that saw the universe as fundamentally manipulable through the right combination of physical actions and spiritual knowledge. If one could transform copper into blue pigment through chemical processes, why not transform mortal flesh into an undying vessel through similar interventions? This belief in transformative potential formed a bridge between Egyptian medicine and alchemy, which would later develop into a more formalized discipline. Many of the techniques used in preparing immortality, elixirs, precise measurements, careful heating, combination of disparate ingredients to create something greater than the sum of its parts, laid groundwork for alchemical practices that would influence science for millennia to come. The Egyptian quest for immortality through potions represents an important evolutionary step in humanity's relationship with mortality. Unlike the Mesopotamian approach of fighting natural processes, the Egyptians sought to harness and redirect natural forces. They recognized that certain substances could indeed alter the body's functioning, a fundamentally correct insight, even if their specific applications often missed the mark. Their systematic approach to documenting and refining formulations over generations also demonstrated an early form of scientific methodology. Physicians would record the effects of various preparations, modify ingredients or proportions, and pass this knowledge to their apprentices. While their underlying theories about life force and divine energies may seem unfounded to modern perspectives, their commitment to observation and refinement contained the seeds of later scientific inquiry. The ultimate failure of Egyptian immortality potions to deliver on their promise might seem predictable from our modern vantage point. Yet their pursuit reflects a sophisticated engagement with the fundamental human desire to transcend biological limitations. The Egyptian approach acknowledged both the material nature of the body and its connection to less tangible aspects of existence, a holistic perspective that recognized the complexity of the life-death boundary. As Egyptian civilization eventually succumbed to foreign conquest and cultural absorption, their elaborate pharmacological approach to immortality faded from practice. Yet, the underlying dream of finding the perfect combination of ingredients to extend life indefinitely never disappeared. It would re-emerge centuries later in new forms as other cultures developed their own approaches to the challenge of mortality through the consumption of special substances believed to confer extraordinary longevity. The legacy of Egyptian immortality potions extends beyond historical curiosity. Their systematic attempt to categorize, combine, and deploy natural substances for medicinal purposes helped establish foundational practices in pharmacy and medicine. While golden elixirs failed to deliver eternal life, the Egyptian pursuit of them contributed to the development of knowledge systems that would eventually lead to genuine life-extending medical innovations millennia later. As the ancient Egyptians mixed their golden elixirs along the Nile, halfway around the world, another civilization was developing its own sophisticated approach to the quest for immortality. In China, the pursuit of eternal life became not merely a personal obsession, but a matter of state importance, reaching its most dramatic expression in the actions of one of history's most powerful rulers. The man who would become China's first emperor was born in 259 BCE with the name Ying Sheng, rising to power as the ruler of the Qin state at just 13 years old. He embarked on an ambitious campaign of conquest. By 221 BCE, he had unified 7 warring states under his control, declaring himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of Qin. His accomplishments were monumental, standardizing written language, currency, and measurements, building vast networks of roads and canals, and initiating construction of the Great Wall. Yet behind these grand achievements lay a man increasingly consumed by a singular fear: his own mortality. Chinese historical records, particularly the Shiji, or records of the Grand Historian, compiled by Sima Qian, document Qin Shi Huang's growing preoccupation with extending his life. As he entered middle age, the emperor began dedicating enormous resources to the search for immortality. He dispatched expeditions across his vast empire and beyond, seeking rare herbs, minerals, and formulations that might grant him endless years to rule his newly unified domain. The emperor's quest unfolded against the backdrop of China's already ancient and sophisticated traditions regarding longevity. By the Qin dynasty, Chinese culture had developed elaborate philosophical frameworks addressing immortality, particularly through the Taoist tradition. Taoist adepts had spent centuries exploring techniques for extending life, including special breathing exercises, dietary regimens, sexual practices believed to conserve vital essence, and most relevant to the emperor's interests, alchemical elixirs. Qin Shi Huang's approach to immortality was shaped by these existing traditions, but amplified by the unprecedented resources at his disposal. Court records describe the emperor summoning China's most renowned fangxi practitioners of esoteric arts, including alchemy, divination, and medicine, to his capital at Xianyang. These specialists competed for imperial favor by presenting increasingly elaborate formulas for life extension, each claiming their preparation surpassed all others in efficacy. The emperor established what might be described as the world's first state-sponsored longevity research program. Special laboratories were constructed within the imperial palace complex, where alchemists worked day and night preparing and testing potential elixirs. Historical sources suggest these facilities employed hundreds of specialists and support staff, all focused on a single objective: developing a formula that would transform the emperor's mortal body into an undying vessel. Unlike the Egyptian approach, which emphasized balance and harmony with natural forces, Chinese alchemical tradition sought transformation through opposition. The core principle was that of conquering or overcoming, using substances that displayed remarkable properties to induce similar qualities in the human body. Materials that resisted decay or destruction were particularly valued, as they might transfer this resistance to the person who consumed them. This philosophical framework led to a dangerous focus on minerals and metals in Chinese immortality elixirs. Gold featured prominently, as it did in Egyptian preparations, but the Chinese alchemists developed far more sophisticated methods for rendering metals consumable. They pioneered techniques for dissolving, recombining, and transforming metallic substances, creating compounds believed to concentrate their essential qualities. Most infamously, these alchemical preparations often contained mercury, known in Chinese as quicksilver or water silver. Mercury fascinated Chinese alchemists because of its unique properties, a metal that behaved like water, seeming to exist between states of matter. They believed this liminal quality made mercury a perfect catalyst for human transformation, potentially enabling transcendence of the boundary between mortality and immortality. The emperor's fascination with mercury extended beyond ingestible preparations. Historical accounts describe his commission of an elaborate model of his empire within his massive tomb complex, complete with flowing rivers of mercury, representing China's waterways. Modern archaeological testing has indeed detected extraordinarily high mercury levels in the soil around his burial mound, lending credence to these historical descriptions. Qin Shi Huang didn't limit his immortality quest to alchemical approaches. He also pursued more mystical paths, becoming increasingly interested in legends of immortal beings said to dwell on distant sacred mountains or mythical islands. The most famous of these expeditions involved the alchemist Xu Fu, who was commissioned to lead a fleet of ships carrying hundreds of young men and women to locate the fabled immortals of Penglai and obtain their elixir of life. Historical records indicate Xu Fu departed with substantial imperial resources, but never returned to report success. Some Chinese historians suggest he may have reached Japan instead, perhaps recognizing the futility of his assigned task and choosing to establish a new life beyond the emperor's reach rather than face punishment for failure. Whatever the truth, the emperor's willingness to commit such extensive resources to this expedition demonstrates the intensity of his immortality obsession. As years passed without the discovery of an effective immortality elixir, Qin Shi Huang's behavior reportedly became increasingly erratic. The Shiji describes him growing paranoid about threats to his life, executing scholars who criticized his methods and anyone who discussed the subject of death in his presence. He began traveling incognito throughout his empire, sleeping in different locations each night to confuse potential assassins or malevolent spirits that might seek to claim his life. During these secretive journeys, the emperor continued consuming various elixirs prepared by his alchemists. Court records describe concoctions containing gold, jade, cinnabar, mercury sulfide, and numerous other minerals believed to promote longevity. Modern toxicology confirms that regular ingestion of these substances, particularly mercury compounds, would have caused progressive physical and neurological damage, potentially explaining the emperor's reported paranoia and erratic behavior in his final years. The supreme irony of Qin Shi Huang's quest is that it likely hastened the very outcome he fought so desperately to avoid. In 210 BCE, during one of his inspection tours to eastern China, the emperor fell ill. Historical accounts describe severe symptoms consistent with mercury poisoning, pain, paralysis, and delirium. Far from his capital, and with his condition deteriorating rapidly, the first emperor of China died at approximately age 49. a life cut short by the very elixirs intended to extend it indefinitely. The political consequences of his premature death were profound. Without adequate succession planning, the Qin dynasty fell into chaos. Within 4 years of Qin Shi Huang's death, the empire he had struggled to unify collapsed. The Han dynasty that eventually restored order would rule China for 4 centuries, establishing many of the governmental and cultural patterns that would define Chinese civilization for millennia to come. Yet even this dramatic failure didn't end China's imperial obsession with immortality elixirs. Throughout subsequent dynasties, numerous emperors pursued similar alchemical approaches to extending life, often with similarly counterproductive results. Han Emperor Wu, 156-87 BCE, became deeply involved in immortality practices, while Tang Emperor Xuanzong, 685-762 CE, reportedly consumed alchemical preparations daily. Some historians estimate that as many as 7 Chinese emperors may have died from elixir poisoning throughout the imperial era. The persistence of these practices, despite their obvious dangers, reveals much about the psychology of absolute power. These emperors, who commanded unparalleled resources and authority, found themselves ultimately powerless against biological reality. The desperate pursuit of increasingly dangerous elixirs reflects not merely personal fear, but an inability to accept the fundamental limitations of the human condition. What makes the Chinese approach to immortality particularly significant in historical context is its systematic nature. Unlike other ancient cultures, where longevity practices remained primarily in the realm of folk tradition or religious ritual, Chinese alchemy developed increasingly rigorous methodologies. Detailed records were kept of formulations and their effects. Theoretical frameworks evolved to explain successes and failures. This systematic approach, though based on flawed premises, contained elements recognizable as proto-scientific. The dangerous focus on metallic elixirs eventually prompted a significant evolution in Chinese immortality practices. By the Tang Dynasty, 618-907 CE, some Taoist adepts began advocating inner alchemy, Naidan, as superior to external alchemy, Weidan. Rather than consuming physical substances, inner alchemy emphasized meditation, specialized breathing techniques, and visualization practices believed to transform the body from within. This shift represented both a practical response to the obvious dangers of metallic elixirs and a philosophical refinement of immortality concepts. Yet, even as inner alchemy gained prominence, the allure of quick transformation through powerful elixirs remained strong, particularly among the elite. Court physicians continued developing and administering metal-based preparations to emperors and nobles well into the modern era. The fundamental belief that certain rare substances could catalyze transcendence of mortality proved remarkably resilient, despite mounting evidence of their dangers. Archaeological findings provide tangible evidence of this persistent belief. Excavations of Han Dynasty tombs have uncovered jade burial suits, thousands of jade pieces sewn together with gold wire to encase the deceased. Jade was believed to prevent decay and potentially facilitate resurrection. Similarly, excavated Tang Dynasty elixir vessels contain residues confirming the historical accounts of mercury-based preparation. These physical artifacts underscore the material resources committed to immortality pursuits across centuries of Chinese history. The broader cultural impact of these imperial quests extended well beyond the palaces. As emperors dedicated vast resources to finding immortality elixirs, they established institutional structures that shaped Chinese medicine, alchemy, and eventually chemistry. Imperial patronage funded the compilation of pharmacological texts, the establishment of specialized academies, and the development of sophisticated laboratory techniques. While the specific goal of immortality remained elusive, these institutions produced genuine advances in understanding the properties and potential applications of various substances. For ordinary Chinese citizens, the imperial obsession with immortality elixirs provided cautionary tales rather than practical examples to follow. Folk wisdom recognized the dangers of metallic preparations, as expressed in sayings that survive to the present day. More accessible longevity practices developed in parallel with elite alchemy, emphasizing balanced diet, moderate exercise, and cultivation of emotional equanimity. These approaches, while less dramatic than imperial elixirs, likely provided genuine health benefits and reasonable life extension. The story of Qin Shi Huang's fatal pursuit of immortality resonates beyond its historical context. It represents a universal human pattern. The powerful often use their resources to deny the most fundamental reality of human existence. In attempting to transcend natural limitations through increasingly extreme measures, they sometimes accelerate the very outcome they seek to avoid. The emperor who unified China, standardized its writing system, and initiated the Great Wall, ultimately could not reconcile himself to the most standardized aspect of human experience, its finite duration. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Chinese immortality tradition lies in its philosophical reflection on the meaning of eternal life. Even as alchemists created dangerous elixirs, Taoist philosophers questioned whether physical immortality should be the ultimate goal. Some argued that acceptance of natural patterns, including death, represented higher wisdom than resistance. This tension between acceptance and transcendence created a rich intellectual tradition exploring the fundamental meaning of mortality and its role in human experience. As China's imperial obsession with alchemical immortality reached its tragic conclusion with each poisoned emperor, other approaches to extending life would emerge across cultures and centuries. The fundamental human desire to transcend death's certainty remained constant, even as the methods evolved. From Mesopotamian sleep avoidance to Egyptian gold potions to Chinese mercury elixirs, each civilization contributed its chapter to humanity's ongoing negotiation with mortality. Throughout history, certain substances have captured human imagination not merely for their beauty or rarity, but for their perceived connection to eternity. Among these, perhaps none has held more persistent allure than gold. This gleaming metal, resistant to tarnish and seemingly immune to time's decay, has inspired a peculiar conviction across disparate cultures that consuming gold could transfer its imperishable quality to the human body. The belief in gold's life-extending properties emerged independently in various civilizations, but reached particular prominence in medieval Europe and ancient China. In European alchemical tradition, gold represented perfection among metals, incorruptible, luminous, and enduring. These physical properties made it a natural symbol for the perfected human body that alchemists sought to create through their art. By the 12th century, European alchemists had developed elaborate theories regarding gold's potential to transform human physiology. They observed that gold remained unchanged when exposed to elements that would corrode other metals. This resistance to corruption suggested gold might similarly protect the body from decay and aging. The yellow color of gold also created an association with the sun, which in turn symbolized vitality, light, and the generative force of life itself. The process of rendering gold consumable posed significant challenges. Simply ingesting gold flakes or dust provided no perceived benefit, as the metal would pass through the body unchanged. Alchemists therefore devoted considerable energy to developing methods for breaking down gold's structure, believing this would release its essential qualities and make them bioavailable. Aurum potabile, or potable gold, became the holy grail of medieval alchemical medicine. Creating this elixir typically involved dissolving gold in aqua regia, a mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acids, followed by various neutralization processes to make the resulting compound less immediately toxic. The final preparation was often mixed with alcohol and flavored with herbs to mask its metallic taste. These golden solutions ranged in color from deep ruby red to bright yellow, depending on the specific preparation method. Paracelsus, the influential 16th century Swiss physician and alchemist, became particularly associated with potable gold preparations. He claimed his gold elixirs could renew youth and preserve the body from all corruption. His writings describe elaborate methods for preparing these solutions, often involving repeated distillations and exposure to specific astrological conditions believed to enhance their efficacy. Paracelsus himself lived only to age 49, suggesting his golden elixirs failed to deliver their promised benefits. The popularity of these preparations extended to the highest echelons of European society. Pope John XXI, who had studied medicine before entering the clergy, reportedly consumed gold elixirs regularly. Elizabeth I of England was known to include gold cordials in her medicinal regimen. The French King Francis I apparently spent enormous sums on alchemists who promised life-extending gold preparations. Court records across Europe document substantial expenditures on ingredients and equipment for producing these prestigious remedies. For the medieval and Renaissance elite, consuming gold represented more than a medical treatment. It functioned as a display of wealth and power, a literal internalization of precious resources unavailable to ordinary people. The practice created a marketplace where charlatans flourished, selling colored water with minimal gold content to those aspiring to the longevity practices of their social superiors. Regulatory records from several European cities document punishments for fraudulent gold elixir sales, indicating both the prevalence of the practice and official concern about its misrepresentation. European medical texts from this period contain numerous case studies, supposedly documenting the benefits of potable gold. These reports claimed remarkable rejuvenation effects, including restoration of hair color, improved vision, renewed sexual vigor, and general resistance to disease. Modern analysis suggests any perceived benefits likely resulted from placebo effect, the natural fluctuation of chronic conditions, or the medicinal properties of herbs and alcohol used in the preparations rather than from the gold itself. What these gold-consuming Europeans didn't understand was that their pursuit of immortality was actively damaging their health. While elemental gold is biologically inert and generally non-toxic when ingested, the compounds created through alchemical dissolution processes were another matter entirely. The gold chloride and gold cyanide compounds commonly found in these preparations can cause kidney damage, liver problems, and neurological symptoms. Improperly neutralized preparations might also contain residual acids that would damage the digestive tract. Some historical accounts describe symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning among enthusiastic consumers of alchemical gold preparations. Cardinal Richelieu, the powerful 17th century French statesman, reportedly suffered tremors, paranoia, and gastrointestinal distress after long-term consumption of gold elixirs prescribed to extend his life. These symptoms may have resulted from gold toxicity, contamination with other metals, or the chemicals used in preparing the elixirs. Across the world in China, gold consumption for longevity developed along parallel but distinct lines from the European tradition. Chinese alchemists incorporated gold into elixir preparations as early as the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, 206 BC, often combining it with cinnabar, mercury sulfide, and other minerals believed to promote transcendence of mortality. The Taoist alchemical tradition viewed gold as embodying the principle of yang, associated with the sun, expansion, and vital energy. Chinese texts describe various methods for preparing gold elixirs, some remarkably similar to European techniques, despite developing independently. The process typically involved multiple stages of heating, cooling, dissolving, and recombining, with specific attention to the purification of gold before its incorporation into medicinal preparations. These elaborate procedures were believed to spiritualize the metal's essence, transforming it from mere matter into a vehicle for transcendence. The Chinese approach often emphasized gold's relationship with other substances rather than its use in isolation. Gold was frequently paired with jade in elixir formulations, creating a balance between yang, gold, and yin, jade, energies. Other common ingredients included pearl, cinnabar, and realgar, arsenic sulfide, all substances valued for their distinctive properties and symbolic associations. This complex formulation approach reflected the Chinese philosophical emphasis on complementary forces and balanced transformation. Imperial court records document numerous Chinese emperors consuming gold preparations, often with consequences similar to their European counterparts. Tang Dynasty Emperor Xuanzong became increasingly erratic after regular consumption of gold-containing elixirs. Emperor Jie Jing of the Ming Dynasty reportedly suffered chronic illness, attributed by some historians to his consumption of alchemical preparations containing gold and other metals. As in Europe, the highest levels of society had both the resources and motivation to pursue these dangerous pathways to potential immortality. Archaeological evidence confirms the historical accounts of gold consumption. Analysis of human remains from elite burials in both Europe and China has sometimes revealed elevated gold levels in hair, bone, and tissue samples. Preserved medicinal vessels from both traditions contain residues consistent with the described preparation methods. These physical findings provide tangible connection to what might otherwise seem merely legendary practices. By the 18th century, European medical opinion began shifting against potable gold as scientific approaches gradually replaced alchemical frameworks. The influential Dutch physician Herman Boerhaave conducted systematic investigations of gold preparations and concluded they offered no medical benefit. The French Academy of Sciences similarly determined that most commercial gold elixirs contained negligible amounts of actual gold and produced no measurable health improvements. These scientific assessments gradually diminished the medical prestige of gold consumption among educated Europeans. In China, a parallel shift occurred as external alchemy weighed in. Practices involving ingested metals gradually gave way to internal alchemy, Naidan, techniques focused on meditation, visualization, and breath control. This transition was accelerated by the undeniable evidence that many prominent practitioners of metal-based alchemy died prematurely, often with symptoms suggesting poisoning. By the Ming Dynasty, 1368-1644 CE, mainstream Taoist practice had largely abandoned dangerous metal elixirs, though some isolated practitioners continued these traditions. Despite these shifts away from consumable gold in both major traditions, the practice never completely disappeared. Into the 19th century, certain European pharmacopoeias still included gold preparations for treating various conditions. In parts of rural China, folk remedies incorporating gold persisted well into the modern era. Even today, certain alternative medicine systems continue to attribute health benefits to colloidal gold preparations, though their claims remain unsupported by scientific evidence. The modern manifestation of gold consumption appears in luxury foods and beverages containing edible gold leaf or dust. While these products make no explicit claims about immortality, their marketing often hints at exclusivity, vitality, and exceptional quality, echoes of the ancient associations between gold and transcendent life force. The contemporary practice is generally safe, as modern edible gold is highly purified elemental gold, rather than the potentially toxic compounds created through alchemical processes. From a scientific perspective, gold offers no biological benefit when consumed. The human body has no mechanism for metabolizing gold, and it has no known function in human physiology. The element's resistance to chemical reaction, once seen as evidence of its special life-giving properties, actually explains its biological inertness. Gold passes through the digestive system unchanged, unless it has been rendered bioactive through chemical processes, in which case it becomes potentially harmful rather than beneficial. What makes the historical belief in gold's life-extending properties particularly interesting is its persistence across cultures that had limited contact with each other. The independent development of similar practices in Europe and China suggests something about gold itself. Its permanence, luster, and rarity speaks to fundamental human concerns about mortality. The metal's physical incorruptibility made it a natural symbol for the transcendence of decay that humans have always sought. The psychological appeal of consuming gold extends beyond its physical properties. The act of internalizing something precious and permanent represented a form of sympathetic magic. The belief that things sharing certain qualities can influence each other. By taking gold into the body, practitioners hope to make themselves more golden, more permanent, more perfect, more resistant to time's erosion. This magical thinking reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of biology, but a profound expression of the human desire to transcend physical limitations. For rulers and elites, gold consumption also served social and political functions beyond personal longevity. By literally incorporating the most valued substance in their society into their physical bodies, they reinforced their special status. The practice created a visible connection between the body of the ruler and the wealth of the realm, between personal vitality and state power. These associations helped justify the immense resources dedicated to these elixirs, even when evidence of their efficacy remained elusive. The tragic irony of gold consumption for immortality lies in its fundamental misalignment with biological reality. Gold's value to human societies derives precisely from properties that make it useless or even harmful to human bodies. Its chemical stability, so desirable in currency and decoration, means it cannot participate in the biological processes that sustain life. In seeking to incorporate gold's permanence, practitioners were working against the very metabolic flexibility and adaptability that enables human life. This contradiction highlights a recurring pattern in humanity's quest for physical immortality. Throughout history, approaches that seek to halt natural processes or incorporate seemingly incorruptible substances have consistently failed and often proved harmful. Life depends not on permanence but on constant renewal, not on resistance to change, but on carefully regulated transformation. The alchemical dream of a perfected, unchanging body fundamentally misunderstands the dynamic nature of biological existence. Yet, dismissing these practices as mere foolishness would miss their significance in the development of medicine and chemistry. The elaborate methods developed for dissolving, purifying, and transforming gold contributed to the emergence of chemical science. The systematic observation and documentation of the effects of various preparations helped establish methodologies that would eventually lead to evidence-based medicine. Even in failure, the quest for immortality through gold consumption advanced human knowledge. The persistent belief in gold's life-extending properties across centuries and civilizations reveals something profound about human psychology. Despite repeated evidence of failure, each generation found reasons to believe they might succeed where predecessors had failed. This pattern reflects both the universal fear of death and the remarkable human capacity for hope in the face of biological reality. Even as gold elixirs claimed victims rather than creating immortals, the dream remained too compelling to abandon. As scientific understanding gradually displaced alchemical frameworks, the specific belief in gold's life-extending properties faded from mainstream acceptance. Yet, the underlying desire to find a substance that might grant exceptional longevity never disappeared. It simply transformed, finding new expression in modern supplements, pharmaceuticals, and anti-aging treatments. The contemporary search for telomerase activators, NADE precursors, and senolytic compounds continues the ancient quest in more scientifically informed but spiritually similar fashion. The story of gold consumption reminds us that the boundary between science and wishful thinking has never been as clear as we might prefer to believe. Even today, with our advanced understanding of biology, humans continue seeking simple solutions to the complex reality of aging and mortality. The golden elixir may have been replaced by antioxidant supplements or cutting-edge pharmaceuticals, but the hope for a substance that might dramatically extend healthy human lifespan remains a powerful driver of both scientific research and profitable pseudoscience. From ancient sleep avoidance to golden elixirs, humanity's quest for immortality has traversed strange and often dangerous terrain. But perhaps no chapter in this endless pursuit is more chilling than a little-known episode from Renaissance Italy, where the fusion of emerging medical science with ancient superstition produced a particularly macabre experiment in extending human life. In the late 15th century, as the Renaissance blossomed across Europe, Rome stood at the center of cultural and intellectual transformation. The Vatican, with its immense wealth and power, attracted leading artists, architects, and thinkers of the age. Among these luminaries were physicians whose ideas would lay groundwork for modern medical practice. Yet, this period of remarkable scientific progress remained deeply entangled with medieval concepts and mystical beliefs, creating a unique intellectual environment where the boundaries between science, superstition, and spirituality blurred considerably. It was in this context that Pope Innocent VIII, born Giovanni Battista Cibo, ascended to the papacy in 1484. Though historical accounts of his early reign describe a man of moderate temperament and political skill, his final years reveal a leader increasingly consumed by fear of mortality. As his health began to decline in early 1492, the Pope grew desperate for solutions that might extend his life and reign. Contemporary chronicles, particularly those compiled by the papal physician Stefano in Feshera, document what followed. According to these accounts, as the Pope's condition worsened, a physician of Jewish background proposed an unprecedented treatment, transfusing the pontiff with blood from young donors. This doctor, whose name appears in some sources as Abraham Ben Meir, suggested that blood contained vital essence that diminished with age. By transferring blood from the young to the elderly, he theorized, this vital essence might likewise be transferred. The concept wasn't entirely without precedent. Throughout medieval Europe, blood had been ascribed mystical properties beyond its obvious biological importance. Folk traditions across the continent described blood as the carrier of not just life, but personal qualities, character traits, and spiritual essence. Medical texts from Galen onward had emphasized blood's central role in maintaining bodily harmony. What made this proposal revolutionary was not the underlying theory, but the literal mechanism of direct blood transfer between humans. According to Feshera's journal, the physician selected 3 young boys, each approximately 10 years old, as blood donors. Historical accounts differ on whether these children were compensated or coerced into participation. Some sources suggest they were offered a ducat each, a significant sum for common families in 15th century Rome. Others imply a more troubling scenario in which the children were simply taken from poor families who had no power to refuse papal authority. The procedure that followed represents one of history's earliest documented attempts at blood transfusion, centuries before the discovery of blood types or development of anticoagulation techniques. Using primitive equipment, likely hollow reeds or metal tubes, the physician attempted to transfer blood from each child to the ailing pontiff. Some accounts suggest he employed a method involving connected vessels, where blood was drawn from the donors into an intermediate container before being introduced into the Pope's circulation. Predictably, given the complete lack of understanding regarding blood compatibility in transfusion medicine, the results were catastrophic. All 3 children reportedly died during or shortly after the procedure. The exact cause of their deaths cannot be determined with certainty from historical records, but modern medical knowledge suggests several possibilities. Excessive blood loss, infection from unsterilized equipment, or air embolism from primitive transfusion techniques. Far from receiving the hoped-for rejuvenation, Pope Innocent XVIII's condition deteriorated rapidly following the failed procedure. Whether due to transfusion, reaction, infection, or simply the progression of his underlying illness, the pontiff died on July 25, 1492, ironically, the same year that would see Columbus reach the Americas and open a new chapter in global history. The papal physician recorded the Pope's final days with clinical detachment. The Pope had fallen into such a deep sleep that occasionally it seemed he was dead. This description suggests possible complications from the transfusion, such as sepsis or hemolytic reaction, though definitive medical diagnosis across 5 centuries remains impossible. What's certain is that the attempt to extend his life through blood transfusion not only failed, but may have hastened his end. News of the disastrous experiment reportedly spread through Rome, creating public outrage over the children's deaths. The physician responsible disappeared from historical records following the incident, his fate unknown. Some accounts suggest he fled Rome to escape punishment, while others imply a darker end at the hands of angry citizens or papal authorities eager to distance themselves from the scandal. What makes this incident particularly significant in the history of immortality pursuits is its position at the intersection of ancient superstition and emerging science. The underlying belief that youth could be transferred through blood had existed in folklore for centuries. Greek mythology described rejuvenating baths of blood, while Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory would later become infamous for allegedly bathing in the blood of young women to preserve her beauty. Yet, unlike purely mystical approaches, this papal experiment employed a proto-scientific methodology, attempting physical transfer of a substance believed to contain vital essence. It represented an early, tragic step toward the medicalization of immortality pursuits, moving beyond potions and elixirs toward interventional procedures based on emerging concepts of human physiology. The tragic irony is that blood transfusion would eventually become a life-saving medical procedure, though not until the 20th century, when Karl Landsteiner's discovery of blood types and subsequent advances in transfusion medicine made it viable. The fundamental intuition that blood contained something essential to life was correct, even if the specific implementation was catastrophically premature and based on misunderstanding. This papal transfusion story serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers inherent in pursuing immortality through experimental means without adequate scientific understanding. Throughout history, those with wealth and power have often been first to access novel treatments, serving as unwitting test subjects for techniques that modern medicine would later refine or reject. The privilege of being first can sometimes become the curse of being prematurely exposed to dangerous innovations. The historical record of this incident remains somewhat contested. Some scholars question details in Fischer's account, noting his known biases against certain papal families. Others point to corroborating sources, including diplomatic correspondence, that referenced unusual medical treatments being attempted as the Pope's health failed. While specific details may be debated, most historians accept that some form of primitive blood transfusion was attempted, with fatal consequences for both donors and recipient. Beyond its historical significance, this incident illustrates a recurring theme in humanity's quest for extended life: the tendency to focus on transferring or acquiring something from the young, rather than understanding the fundamental mechanisms of aging. From ancient beliefs about consuming youth-giving substances to modern interest in young blood factors, this conceptual approach has persisted across centuries and cultures. Modern science has indeed identified certain regenerative factors in young blood that decline with age, leading to legitimate research on plasma components that might address age-related conditions. Yet, contemporary researchers approach this subject with careful ethical frameworks and rigorous scientific methodology, a stark contrast to the desperate, uninformed papal experiment of the 15th century. The children who lost their lives in this misguided attempt at extending the Pope's years represent countless unnamed victims of humanity's immortality obsession throughout history. From slaves forced to test potentially toxic elixirs for ancient rulers to servants exposed to radioactive elements in early 20th century rejuvenation treatments, the pursuit of extended life for the privileged few has often come at the expense of the vulnerable many. As the Renaissance continued to unfold in the years following Pope Innocent VIII's death, medical understanding gradually advanced. Andreas Vesalius published his groundbreaking work on human anatomy in 1543. William Harvey described blood circulation in 1628, and scientific approaches slowly displaced mystical frameworks in understanding human physiology. Yet, the dream of dramatically extended life through medical intervention remained a powerful motivator for both legitimate research and dangerous experimentation. In the centuries since this papal transfusion, humanity's approaches to extending life have grown increasingly sophisticated. Modern medicine has nearly doubled human life expectancy through public health measures, antibiotics, vaccines, and treatments for previously fatal conditions. These advances came not through magical thinking about transferring youth, but through methodical scientific investigation of disease mechanisms and biological processes. Yet, even today, the boundary between evidence-based medicine and wishful thinking about radical life extension remains contested territory. Silicon Valley billionaires fund research into age reversal, wellness influencers promote unproven supplements claiming to extend lifespan, and clinics worldwide offer expensive rejuvenation treatments with limited scientific support. The fundamental human desire to postpone death continues driving both legitimate scientific inquiry and questionable interventions. What distinguishes our contemporary pursuit of extended life from historical approaches is not necessarily our motivations, but our methods. Modern longevity research relies on understanding biological mechanisms, telomere shortening, cellular senescence, mitochondrial function, epigenetic changes, rather than magical thinking about special substances or vital essences. Yet, the danger of premature application before adequate understanding remains a constant concern in cutting-edge medical research. As we look back across the sweep of human attempts to achieve immortality, from Mesopotamian sleep, avoidance to Egyptian potions, from Chinese mercury elixirs to golden drinks and blood transfusions, certain patterns emerge. Each approach reflected its culture's understanding of life and death. Each represented a blend of observation, theory, and hope. Each ultimately failed to deliver true immortality, often at tremendous cost to practitioners and subjects alike. Perhaps the most profound insight from this historical journey is that human mortality has served as both an existential challenge and a catalyst for discovery. The quest to overcome death has driven advances in medicine, chemistry, biology, and philosophy, even as specific approaches proved misguided or dangerous. The underlying inquiry pushed forward human understanding of our bodies and the natural world. Today, as genetic engineering, stem cell therapies, senolytics, and other cutting-edge approaches promise to extend healthy human lifespan, we stand at a unique moment in this ancient quest. For the first time, science offers evidence-based interventions that might significantly extend healthy human life without the catastrophic side effects of historical approaches. Yet, the ethical questions remain as complex as ever. Who will access these technologies? What social structures would accommodate dramatically extended lives? What would it mean for human experience if death became increasingly optional rather than inevitable? As we contemplate these questions, the tragic story of 3 unnamed children who died in a misguided attempt to extend a pope's life serves as a powerful reminder. The pursuit of extended life, divorced from ethical consideration and scientific understanding, can lead to consequences directly opposed to its life-affirming intent. In our continuing quest for longer, healthier lives, the historical record urges us to proceed with both hope and humility, recognizing that immortality has always extracted a price from those who pursue it too desperately. The many ways people have tried to live forever tell us as much about our fears as our aspirations, as much about our values as our understanding. From ancient Mesopotamia to Renaissance Rome, from imperial China to medieval Europe, the story of immortality seekers is ultimately the story of what it means to be human, to live with the knowledge of our mortality while imagining what might lie beyond it. Throughout human history, our quest for immortality has led us down strange and often dangerous paths, whether avoiding sleep like the ancient Mesopotamians, consuming golden elixirs like medieval Europeans, ingesting mercury like Chinese emperors, or attempting primitive blood transfusions like Renaissance popes. We have demonstrated both remarkable creativity and startling recklessness in our attempts to overcome death's inevitability. What drives this endless pursuit? Perhaps it's not just fear of ending, but fear of leaving things unfinished, relationships incomplete, work undone, experiences untasted. Perhaps it's the uniquely human ability to imagine a future beyond our natural span, to conceive of possibilities that exceed our biological limitations. Or perhaps it's simply the most profound expression of the survival instinct that propels all living things forward through time. Whatever the motivation, our struggle against mortality continues. And while true immortality remains elusive, the quest itself has yielded unexpected dividends. Medical advances that extend healthy years, philosophical insights that enrich our limited time, and a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life, precisely because it is finite. So what do you think is the strangest method humans have tried to live forever? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through humanity's immortality obsession, please like this video, subscribe to Insomnia History, and turn on notifications so you never miss our explorations of history's strangest and most fascinating stories. Until next time, remember that while immortality might remain beyond our grasp, how we use our limited time is entirely within our control.